Hopefully I'm live, you lot. Yeah. Um it's all right. I just pointed out that I was still going to be late. I put the countdown on, I did everything like that, and then I still missed the start. It's typical of me. Oh, come on, guys, you should know me by now. Don, can you let me know what it sounds like in the comments, please? What the hell, YouTube? What are you doing? Uh, YouTube's being weird. Right. There you go. I'm here. Hey, Bronwyn. Hopefully you guys can hear me and it's not just spinning around at your end like it claims to be. I don't sound like I'm behind a fan. Woo! It sounds like a weird scouser. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. That pretty much sums me up. Am I spot on 8:30? Right now, one of you guys needs to turn up to my funeral in hopefully decades' time just to say I was on time to something once. You know, I want this on record somehow. Okay. So tonight, while we wait for a few more people to turn up, because everyone's going to assume I'm going to be about half an hour late, we're talking about parameters. It's my favorite question. It's on a little sign that you can just see behind me, over there somewhere. I can't point to it. It's all reversed on the screen. But yeah, just over my shoulder is a sign that says, "What are your parameters?" And I thought it would be a good thing to actually say, what the heck do we mean by that statement? It's a question I always say. My phone actually tries to autocorrect most things I say that begin with W to "What are your parameters?" Yeah, you guys are going to end up seeing a week by week setup because I go live two or three times a week from here and it's behind me. And I don't like you. Tom A and Connor, you are both in trouble for fine. Which we have decided stands for, or what did we decide it was? Something I'm now estimating. I can't remember what we decided the F was, and it wasn't a swear word. Oh, fluctuating. I'm now estimating. Thank you, Tom. Yeah, we decided fine stood for fluctuating. I'm now estimating, which I think might have to come out as a t-shirt or a mug or something because, you know, yeah, it's it works. So, what do we actually mean by parameters? So, for those of you who are coming here completely fresh, you might have just stumbled across the group and gone, "Oh, I'll go see what the weirdo's on about." We're talking about your ammonia, your nitrites, your nitrates, your pH, your KH, your GH, and your temperature. When we ask that question, if you're going to be really nice to us, can you also add in your tank size, your stock, and maybe even your substrate? For certain questions, we're then going to ask for your nitrates, your pH, and your KH out of your tap. So there can be more than just those. Oh yeah, age of setup. Thank you, Tom. That's another one we're constantly going. Age of setup. Any random deaths you've had? That one we tend to throw in as well. And these are we're not quite sure what's going on. There's nothing jumping out at us, or there is something jumping out at us, and we really, really want to isolate everything else possible. Questions, but let's just focus on parameters. So the cycle that you guys should all be able to talk about in your sleep is the process where little microorganisms go take it from ammonia. They then digest that, and basically one of the waste products from them is nitrites. Different microorganisms, and this is the crucial fact, then translate that from nitrites into nitrates. Nitrates are not safe. I hate it when people go nitrates are safe. They are safer. In the same way that salt is safer than arsenic. Okay? You can still overdose on salt. You've just got to have a lot more of it. And that's the crucial thing. Any toxin has a lethal limit. Everything is safe in small enough quantities. And okay, some of those quantities are microscopically small. I'm not denying that for some of these things, we're talking about such tiny, tiny quantities that you can't measure that low. But it still holds true. You can have anything, any poison in the world you like, as long as it's in tiny enough quantities. And you can make anything lethal if you have enough of it. People have died just from drinking too much water. Yeah, so Daniel's just said if his nitrates go to above 40 ppm in the week, he'll do an extra water change. Takes no time. Yeah, some of us get 40 ppm out the tap. I'm not right now. I'm alright right now. I'm not. Although, having said that, once this rain filters through, I might have. I'll have to test my water before I use it. In which case, then it starts to get a problem. You notice I'm saying microorganisms, not bacteria? I very deliberately said it that way, as there is evidence that in fresh water, it's not bacteria. It's archaea, and I hesitate to say a more primitive form. They used to be considered that, but they're not. So it's let's just go with microorganisms. Although I'll end up slipping into just calling them bacteria at some point. Now, just a very quick one for cycling a tank. It's something that Sue and I are going to get our heads together and do a bit of a more in-depth discussion on. But Sue tested it out for me. We all know it. We all cycle our tanks. We put ammonia in. We let the microorganisms translate that into nitrites. And then we have weeks upon weeks upon weeks of nitrites. I have a theory. I think it's because the microorganisms that transfer, yeah, here you go. I'm talking about that thing you did for us. So yes, is there any additions or changes on the parameters one as well? So I have a theory that the ammonia colonizing, ammonia eating microorganisms, I said it, I want credit for having said it, they colonize your filter bacteria first. Once they've colonized your filter bacteria, there's no space for the nitrite-eating filter bacteria. So what Sue did, and like I say, we're going to get our heads together and probably write this up this week, maybe next week, see how we both are for time. She put both nitrites and ammonia in. And don't worry, it wasn't ammonium nitrate. Although, that would have been really simple, but a little deadly. Only a little. But anyway, separate. It was ammonia and nitrate separate. And what that meant was that things cycled a lot quicker. You didn't have that terrible lag when the nitrites eating bacteria needed to mix it together. Christopher Lee just asked what was the thing. It was an Inkbird. So there you go. I'll let Tom answer that one for you because Tom's also an equal fan. So that to me proves that you've got two separate organisms in fresh water, and that they both need space to colonize. I'm hoping maybe to get some sort of cycling kit out. The issue is, I think that if you've got two of them, if you've got a cycling kit, and I'm preaching to you guys, I'm a bit preaching to the converted, and that's the only thing that worries me. So it's one. I'm just noticing I'm getting a Tom fight in the comments. Yeah, brilliant. Don, don't run away. You need to moderate between those two. Be good, boys. So yeah, cycling kits, I'm a little bit worried that it's preaching to the converted with you guys, but we get enough beginners ongoing help that maybe it would be worth us building something like that. Don's just discovered he's the one with the moderator powers on that comment thread. Yeah, we're going to definitely look at it. It was interesting. I think the reason I stopped first time was, when they were changing the rules on selling acids because of the acid attacks, it just worried me a little bit what regulations we'd have to conform to. That doesn't seem to be much of a problem anymore, so I'll have a look, double check there's no rules, and I think it'll be something we could do, but it cycled a lot quicker than just using ammonia. And I think it was interesting scientifically as well. So let's start at the start with that one, ammonia. It's caused by waste from your fish, but crucially, it doesn't come out of thin air. So we tend to think that if you've got fish, you're going to have nitrogenous waste, ammonia. It doesn't necessarily hold true. If they're not getting any nitrogen in, they're not breathing it out of the air. Nitrogen in the air, despite being super abundant, is so stable that it's incredibly difficult to be broken apart. There's only a few things that do it. Lightning, certain bacteria living on the nodules of the roots of like peas and beans. And the third nitrogen fixing thing that happens, peas and beans is the main one. Oh yeah, human activity. So we do it. We actually make ammonia by taking nitrogen out the air. Yeah, we need Tom on a stream wearing his 53B shirt. We do. It would be good. So your fish aren't doing any of those. Unless you've got some massive electrical problems in your tank, you are not getting the nitrogenous gas out the air going in and being used to create ammonia in your tank. So where's it coming from? Really simple. It's coming from the protein in fish food. You can measure how much ammonia will be coming out the other end of your fish by how much protein you've let go in this end. Now remember, if they don't eat the food, then it's going to decompose anyway and it'll create ammonia all on its little own. That's really crucial. That means if you know you're going to be adding extra fish, you don't have to increase the amount of ammonia being produced quickly. What you can do is just keep feeding them the same amount. Just remember to take into account that the pet shop's been feeding the fish, so there's a little bit extra going to be going on there. Now Christopher's just said he's getting ammonia spikes specifically from the Malawi tank. Now that's a problem because, let's carry on a little bit. So you know where you're getting your ammonia from? It's from the protein in your fish food being digested. Now remember, fish generally can't digest carbohydrates, so the only thing they can digest is fats and proteins. And I don't think you could sort of go for a high-fat diet. You just end up with like a big oily slick on top of the water. But it would be interesting to see, can fish take a higher fat diet for scenarios where you're maybe getting ammonia spikes or something like that. So what we're then looking at from that side of things is we know where our ammonia is coming from. Is it dangerous? Is ammonia dangerous? Hell yes. We often see people on the group going, my parameters are fine, my ammonia is only 0.5. That's a problem. Crucially here, and why I said oop with the Malawi tank. Ammonia can exist in two forms. The lower the pH, the more of the ammonia is in a safer form, roughly the same, maybe about level with nitrates. The safer form, which is ammonium. Now, ammonium, like I say, is much safer at low pH. If you have a Malawi tank, you've increased the hardness or already had very hard water. That means you've increased the pH, which means you haven't got ammonium, you've got straight ammonia. Now, how dangerous is ammonia? The generally advised safe limit for pet shops and for us is 0.02 parts per million. Your average test kit isn't measuring that. Do you know what is measuring that? Sennhei's. Okay? And that's why Sennhei's measure down to that. I just remembered I've got this one. This one's an ancient one. This was won at an old BCA event. Be fine. Okay, Sennhei. And all it is that little pit there, that measures, I'll get this right, temperature, ammonia, not ammonium. It just measures ammonia. So if it's all locked up as ammonium, it won't register any. It registers just the ammonia. Your pH, and that little one's just telling you when you need to replace this thing, the slide. Great piece of kit, those ones. So, and yeah, this tank's going to have one. And when I'm finally earning enough money to be able to spend more money on this hobby, I will be getting the Sennhei's in as many of the tanks as I can. Just checking we've got. Yep. Oh yeah, they are absolute. I do love my Sennhei. The only thing I don't like about the Sennhei, and I'll be completely honest, is it sends you a message. I kid you not. It can text you. It can email you. So let's give you a scenario that's happened. I am in work. when I was still a teacher. When I was lecturing that day, I was in uni, I was lecturing. I am giving a lecture to a group of students on the evolution of fish and how that means that we are shaped like we are and why we got that little bit there. Okay. And I get an email flashed up and it was from Senai and it was an alert that one of my tanks had high ammonia. There wasn't a great deal I could do. The students got a very quick, would you all like to go off on a coffee break? They went on a coffee break and I was ringing home going, can someone go and check my tank, please? So yeah, mates were getting called. Can you go around and do a quick water change? Because it just alerted me. Yeah, I'll get the links in a second, guys. The Senai itself isn't the most expensive bit. The really expensive bit is, let me see if I've got it. If you can set it up to next to a computer, it's far cheaper because you don't have to get the web server. Okay, so that's the expensive bit. Absolutely adore it, but that is the expensive bit, and you need one web server per Senai. They keep talking about bringing out a version where you can plug in multiple probes into one web server, which obviously with my tanks would be far better for me. I could just have, I think they were talking about 5 per unit. So if that comes out, oh, that'd be a lifesaver, because then I could do my entire fish room a lot cheaper. But yeah, you can get them off Amazon. Like I said, I'll grab the links in a second. Sorry, the tortoises are wandering around, keep catching my attention in the Viv up there. So if you've got ammonia and you've got high pH, then you need. Everyone's just found it. The students just went, no. So what you're looking at there is if you've got high pH and ammonia, it's going to be all ammonia. There's not going to be very much ammonium, and that's where it gets toxic. So we're talking about 0.02 ppm. On a standard test kit, that's going to read 0. So if it's not reading 0 off a standard test kit, you're over the limit. However, standard test kits convert all the ammonium into ammonia. And then you get a scenario where you get the total amount. So it's not very accurate. What you need to do if you are worried is there is a calculator. Put in ammonia calculators, ammonium calculators. There's a calculator online, and that will work out where it needs to be. What you've got in your tank, you need to put everything in. It's designed for marine, so just put the salinity to 0, and that will give you the calculation as to what you're working with. Right. So you've cleared the ammonia through your tank, you've got none of that, and you've now got nitrites, the one with 2 eyes. That's more toxic than ammonia. So if you haven't managed to kill your fish off by having ammonia, and you've now got nitrites, you've got more problems. So you've now got nitrites. That's what causes brown blood disease. Now, I've talked about this one a few times before. This is where salt comes from, why we need salt in our tanks. We don't need salt in our tanks, but this is where it comes from. Salt will treat brown blood disease, and brown blood disease is deadly. Brown blood disease kills your fish. So what we're talking about there is, in the days before this was all understood, and we had cycles going on every time someone did a big water change because of old tank syndrome, which I will also explain in a second, they'd have nitrite. They'd add salt, the fish wouldn't instantly die. They'd die further down the line, but they wouldn't be instantly dying. So that's where that comes from. And that's where it's a lot easier if you... sod off, Don, I'm talking about freshwater tanks. I've got to be nicer to my mods. Sod off, Don. So what we're looking at there is salt was saving them in the short term. What do we use now if you've got nitrites in your tank? Well, first of all, panic and get your tank sorted out. Secondly, meth blue. Meth blue will help draw the toxins out the blood. Meth blue is really good at binding to things and putting it into a form that can be excreted by the body and then just flushed out its system. So that's the one. Nitrite will then get converted to nitrates. Yeah, Don might be saving me with my computer problems, so we all love Don. Everyone go be nice to Don. um No, is someone being naughty on the main page? Someone go smack them. Okay, so nitrates are still a problem. How do you deal with nitrates? Water changes if your water is low in nitrates. However, if your water is high in nitrates, you're not solving the problem. Each week when you do your water change, not only are adding nitrates, but you're not getting rid of last week's. How can you deal with it? How do I deal with it? I've got an RO setup. I'm going to look at getting a nitrate removing resin, a filter for that. That's an option. In that you will get, hopefully I will get nitrates removed. For me, because my water's very, very soft, I don't have to replace my filters, my resin on my RO unit very often. So RO strips everything out. If you've not got very much in your water anyway, it's pretty economical because I'm not having to replace my resins and my filters very often. The only one I do have to replace quite often is that first reasonably coarse filter. It goes a horrible rusty colour. It looks vile. That's the first one. But once it's past there, and I think that's just because I live in an area that's got older pipes. So that does tend to... But again, I'm talking about every 6 to 8 weeks, not like every week or something like that. So for me, that's economical. If you live in a hard water area, you're actually starting to look at something like just a nitrate removing resin. But that's before the water goes into your tank. Prime claims to bind these things. I will be honest, I quite frequently have to dechlorinate the test tank, and the test tank's got a Senai. So Prime claims to detoxify ammonia. I'm not sure how it does it, because it doesn't change it to ammonium, because it still registers on the Senai, and I use Prime and Safe to dechlorinate. So I'd want to know more details about that. And anyway, they'll say it only does it temporarily. So 24 hours down the line, you've got the same issue. Ocean-free hydras, they do seem to get rid of the nitrates. We're still not 100% sure how. And as we were talking about last night, soft water, they don't work as well. Which is a shame, as they'd probably be perfect for those tanks that the pH is so low, we don't get a cycle. But yeah, that's the issue. So you've finally got around to nitrates. We then ask for your pH. pH tells a lot, and if we get the API master test kit, that's the limit. That's all we've got. In general, if you've got a high pH, you've got alkaline water. If you've got a low pH, it's acidic. Sorry, I'm half asleep. In general, if you've got high pH, you've got hard water. If you've got a low pH, you've got soft water. I am talking rubbish tonight. It's Saturday. And I had one of my dogs decided that waking me up on the hour, every hour last night was such a great plan. So, anyway, if you've got hard water, generally your pH is high. If you've got soft water, it's generally acidic. What does that mean for us? If you've got hard water, you've got less leeway with ammonia, but you've got more leeway with water changes. If you've got soft water, you've got more leeway with ammonia, but less leeway with water changes. So for me, if I miss a water change, my pH will crash to 5.5 without a blink. And some days it comes out of the tap at pH 8. So in 1 week, my water can go so that water that's come out of the tap at 8, I then have to leave it 24 hours, it will drop to about 6.7. If I don't do a water change in a week's time on that tank, it'll be down at 5.5. That's just how it happens with my water. Which leads us nicely to something called old tank syndrome. So if you come to us and you say, my tank's been set up for ages, you then give us what sounds like the arbitrary numbers off the internet. It's got 0 ammonia, 0 nitrites, and 0 nitrates, or something like that. And then you tell us your pH is super low. And now we're going to start worrying, especially if you're in a hard water area. That means you've got something called, that means you've probably got something called old tank syndrome. Old tank syndrome happens because ammonia is NH3. Nitrates are NO3. If You notice we've got oxygen on the nitrates, but no hydrogens, and those hydrogens have had to go somewhere, added to the fact that also nitrates are nitric acid. So the entire process of the cycle makes your water more and more acidic. What does that mean? So your entire cycle makes your water more and more acidic. Those little bits of acids that are now floating around should be soaked up by your KH. Notice I say should, because you haven't got an infinite amount of KH in there. So once your KH is used up, your pH, which was nice and stable, is now starting to drop and drop and drop. If you're not doing so, you've now got very low pH. Your cycle has stalled because the bacteria can't cope below pH 6. They can, but they need to be different microorganisms, bacteria, whatever you want to call them. So they're not coping. The ones you've cycled in aren't coping below 6. You then do a big water change. Your pH rises, goes back to whatever your tap water was, say 7.5. All that ammonium that was locked up nice and safe becomes ammonia. That's toxic and kills all your fish. And people come back and going, I've never done water changes. My tank is fine. Whenever I do water changes, fish die. And that's why it's old tank syndrome. So you're going to say, well, why can't I just leave it? Well, first of all, your fish might not cope with very, very low water, but also bacteria. And I don't mean the stuff in our filter that we want. I mean mycobacteria, which is the source of fish TB, E. coli, salmonella, all those wonderful things that might give you food poisoning and stuff like that. They're now breeding away in that nice warm little cesspool of your tank. Water changes keep them at a manageable level. Not water changing increases and just lets them run wild. Fish TB thrives in tanks that haven't had water changes. And that's not to say that if you've had fish TB, I'm accusing you of not doing water changes. Fish TB comes in on fish that are just plain ill. I've had it and I do plenty of water changes. I know a few of the mods have had it who also do plenty of water changes. But if you want to give TB a fighting chance, then don't bother with your water changes. You'll get old tank syndrome, your pH will crash, and then you're just in a world of hurt. If any of you guys end up helping someone with old tank syndrome, what can you do? Get them to test their tap water pH, get them to test their tank pH, see how far apart it is. The last thing you want to be doing is increasing it massively and quickly. But you are going to get to a point where you have to tip over. So there's two options here. One, they do an 80% water change. They put up with the fact that they're now going to have to recycle their tank, and they do a fish in cycle. So that means testing daily or twice daily. That means water changing probably daily. That means massively reduced feeding, or going to things like ocean-free hydrofilters, or getting a clone off, if you're helping and you're nearby, getting a clone off someone else's filter media. So they're your main options. However, if they don't want to go about that route, the other option is, and you're also going to do a massive pH swing, so you're probably going to lose some fish just from the pH swing. So that's that route. It's not my favourite, but for people who are really impatient, that's the way you have to go. The second option is, as Thomas just said, very, very small daily water changes. And I'm talking about 5%, 10%. The problem is the tank's probably not cycled. Sometimes it'll rebound once you get it above that 6. So it's constant checks as well. It might be even with daily water changes that they do end up crashing, that they've still crashed their cycle totally. I prefer the small daily water changes route. It also gets them into the habit of doing daily water changes. So then if there is a small or even a huge blip, they're in that habit and they can carry on with that. Once their pH is back to similar to the tap after 24 hours, so get them to get a glass of water, fill it with tap water, put it to one side for 24 hours, and then test the pH on that. Water companies often put things in there to change the pH of your water when it's going through the pipes. So you can't say for definite what it's going to be. Once it's back there, test, and then just get them doing those daily water changes to keep things going. pH, Why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because of the going up and down. But let's say one you'll frequently see is you might see someone saying the fish needs soft and acidic. It needs hard and alkaline water, something like that. And we tend to say KH is what the fish wants and pH is just actually pH is what the fish have evolved to look at, to know about. KH is where you start to get ammonia and ammonium problems, and KH is what you really need to keep your water stable. But the fish have actually evolved for GH and GH and pH. So when we talk about the evolution of the fish and how their gills are set up to absorb more and less of things, yes, the KH and the GH is really important from absorption and that side of things, but actually their bodies have evolved in that pH. Because just like us, they have to have a particular blood pH. And if anyone's ever told you that you need to have an alkaline or an acid diet to improve your blood pH, could you just tell them they're idiots? And even if they're really close friends, still tell them they're idiots? Do you know how you sort out your blood pH? You breathe. That's the trick. Your blood pH, homeostasis for both fish and humans is the same in that we need to stay the same and they need to stay the same. And for us, we regulate our blood pH in part by the amount of carbon dioxide in our system. It's similar for them. They've got regulatory systems and they've evolved to live within a range of pH. How'd you find this out? There's websites like Seriously Fish and stuff like that. My favorite way is to check what they live in the wild. Ideally, check what they lived in the wild like 50 years ago, because we've managed to screw up a lot of habitats. But check now, check what you can. Some fish will live in a range because it changes over the year. Clown loaches are a great example. Actually, most of the year for them is quite soft. They just have a small part of the year where the water is quite hard, and that's why we do this whole, oh, of course you can survive in, the Malawi tank. No, they can't. They don't live in it year round in the wild. They are actually a fish that more prefers neutral to soft water. They can just survive in harder water. So that's one of my things there. But be careful that you check the micro area that they're in. I'll give you a straightforward example. Sonodontus, so featherfin catfish, upside down catfish, featherfin squeakers. They're all names for different and the same cynos. Again, cynos are one we tend to say are fine in Malawi tanks. We say, oh, they're fine because they come from Lake Malawi. Actually, they come from the areas surrounding Lake Malawi. Some of them live in the rivers far enough away from the lakes, and by that I could mean like 500 yards, that they're in very, very soft water, because some of the rivers flowing into Malawi and, any of the Rift Lakes are very, very soft. And you can prove that by Lake Victoria. I know it's a fair distance away, but that is incredibly low pH and incredibly soft water. It's just slightly different geology as you work down. So cynos can live 500 yards away from the lake and be in incredibly soft water. Equally, you've got things like the fish that Miranda's gossip she's about, sulfur cichlids. They live in about pH 9. Stupidly hard water, and have evolved a particular way of coping with that, because there's no bacteria that will complete the cycle when the pH is that high. So they don't produce ammonia, they produce urea. Same as weather loaches, interestingly enough. Weather loaches produce urea. Now, that doesn't poison them. That, again, is in a different method, isn't used by the cycle in the same way, which is why when people go, I'm going to pee in my tank to get the cycle started, I'm sitting there going, don't! Yeah, eventually it'll break down to ammonia, but it's going to take a good while. I'm talking, in some cases, maybe weeks. And we know that because we know that certain fish don't produce ammonia, they produce urea, and that is kept out. That isn't a part of the cycle. There are some bacteria that will then break urea down into ammonia, but this is the case that we don't know that they're going to be present in that tank. And we know that they're not present in some places that where these particular cichlids. I think sulfur mollies are another one that I'll have to check on the sulfur mollies. I suspect they would do, knowing the conditions they live in the wild, but I haven't read any research that says they definitely do. But I know weather loaches can choose to whether to produce urea or ammonia. So it's one of those things. It's really interesting to see. It sounds horrible. I'm really fascinated by fish pee, but it is. It's really interesting, and it's interesting how it carries on further down, and different ones, how different fish have evolved to those tiny little niches where you're sitting there thinking, I'm not putting my hand in that. That's going to really sting if I put my hand in that. And there's a little fish swimming around quite happily in it. So that's your pH. KH, I've slightly alluded to that already. KH is those little buffers that wander around and soak up all the acids. KH is not a part of GH. We get so many people saying, oh, you can't have KH higher than GH. Yeah, you can. They're two separate things. It's just that in nature, generally, the sources are linked. So KH is your carbonates and your bicarbonates. And if anyone says they're putting sodium bicarbonate in, I'll get upset. Sodium bicarbonate is not a good way to raise your KH because it's not the sodium that your fish need. We don't want to be putting sodium in, especially as we're going to put chlorine in at different points. And there you go, you've got salt. In the nature, the one we tend to do for raising hardness is calcium carbonate, which is limestone. So limestone, interestingly enough, can't dissolve unless the water's acidic. How does the water get acidic? Well, acid rain. I'm sitting here in the middle of a little rainstorm outside my shed. That's actually falling at pH, anywhere the pH between 5.5 and 6.5. That is well acidic enough to change the rock. So it will fall on calcium carbonate. It will alter it a little bit more, and then that can be washed away into the river. And now you have calcium carbonate floating down the river. The carbonate bit is your KH. The calcium bit is your GH. Fish will use that calcium, just like any other animal needs calcium for its bones or exoskeleton, well, animals' bones. They will use up that carbonate, and they absorb it mostly through their gills. There are uptake sites on their gills. And that's why certain fish need very, very hard water in terms of GH. And it's your usual suspects. We're talking about things like Malawi. We're talking about some of the Asian species that live in very hard water. We are talking about, my brain's just gone, nope, I'm not going to give you Central American cichlids. They live in moderately hard water, so they have that uptake. However, a soft water fish, think about for them. They've evolved in water that is, let's say, the rainforest. So have a think about water falling in the rainforest. That falls down, it goes through peat and things like that, so it picks up more humic acid. It comes out into the river in that lovely black water, tannin-stained state. What it doesn't have is any rock particles. And that's because the rainforest is not that well known for great big limestone chunks. By the rainforest, I mean the Amazon rainforest there. I should have said that correctly. Dartford rainforest, I kid you not, Dartford has its own rainforest, one of the wettest places on earth. And that's known for limestone. That's pretty well known for limestone. But anyway, Amazon rainforest, not so much. So we're talking about that humic acid stained water that fish have been evolving in for long enough that some of those fish have got completely different chromosome numbers. That's how long the evolution's been happening. An angelfish has 24 pairs of chromosomes. Something coming out of Lake Malawi is going to have 22 pairs of chromosomes. Evolutionary wise, that's a huge gap. What's happened to its calcium uptake? So an angelfish will take up every microscopic bit of calcium it can out of that water. Great. So you say, well, that's okay. My angelfish is getting extra calcium. Calcium is good for you. Too much calcium can then cause calcification. Actually, it goes solid like rocks. And we're finding that when we look at older fish that have lived in hard water, we are looking at their organs have actually started to calcify. It started to turn to rock. So that's why it's not a good idea to put soft water loving fish in hard water. Take it the other way around, something like a Malawi cichlid in soft water. It's never really evolved to have those extra tricks to take up calcium. It's just been a case of opening its mouth and taking a gulp of water and ta-da, there's calcium. So for some of them, they can actually take up all their calcium just in their guts. What's the issue with that then? You put them in soft water and their bones are actually going to start to decalcify. Your equivalent of rickets in a child. and next thing you know, they're going to get bendy. Reptiles, for turtles and tortoises, we call it rubber ball syndrome because you can actually squash them like little rubber balls. It's horrific. If anybody wants to see that, a vet friend of mine has actually filmed himself doing it to a tortoise he'd had to euthanize, and he just squished it like a little rubber ball, and it's all of this. So this is why I'm a bit pedantic about going, please put them in the right water, because I can understand, and I've done a bit too much research in the what's happening internally to change them. Also, if you are if you're nutrient deficient, think of all the issues that can cause. So rickets. I've got a family member being tested now for Alzheimer's or something along that lines. First thing they're testing for is deficiencies. They're very suspicious that it might just be a deficiency. It's not going to be. And we're almost deliberately giving our fish these deficiencies by not giving them the amounts of nutrients that they need to uptake. Right. So GH is your calcium, KH is your carbonate. Most of the test kits only measure that. In the wild, we also have magnesium bicarbonate as well. It's much smaller amounts. Some of the water in Britain that's really famous, so Buxton is the main one I'm thinking of here, is actually famous because it's got quite a high magnesium bicarbonate content. So if you've ever been to Buxton, you can go and get water out the drinking fountain. Or you can just buy Buxton water out the freezer at pretty much any supermarket in the world. That's actually got quite high magnesium bicarbonates in it compared to other waters. If you're down in, say, Kent, I don't think you've got much magnesium at all. I think you're mostly calcium carbonate there. And it's especially going to be so much more outweighing it. I will be honest, now I think about it, I don't know the magnesium content of Lake Malawi off the top of my head. I will have to look up that one. Let me just, hold on guys, this is how sad I am. I'm going to have to make a note about that one. So it might be that that's actually something they're adapted to draw up. Yeah, I ask myself questions sometimes on these streams and end up having to write them down so that I won't forget them. I'll come back to you guys with that one. So yeah, that's the way all the way around there we've done up to GH. What were the other ones we were looking at? Is your tap any different? So we talked about old tank syndrome. If you come back to us and say, my KH in my tank is 6, but it's 12 out my tap, we know you're probably not doing enough water changes. It might be you're slightly overstocked. It might be there's something in there. It might be that you've got something like an ocean-free hydro and that's using it all the way up. That then leads to the fact that you are, we can tell that. And what would we advise? Just increase your water changes slightly. We've had people whose KH out their tap is sort of 18, 20, and in the tank it's been 0 to 2. So when we've actually tried to probe into that one a little bit, we found out that they don't believe in water changes or they don't find time to do water changes. And sadly, I know there's a lot of reasons. I mean, I've had weeks where the last thing I wanted to do was water changes. I've been getting back at sort of midnight, and because it's been midnight every night, I've had to go down and do them. I'm a great believer in that things happen. Okay, life goes to hell in a handcart sometimes. But I chose to have my animals. So if it means between my animals or me, they didn't choose me, I chose them. And that means I have to give my fish what's needed. Thank you, Don. Malawi has high magnesium content. It's like 5 times higher than Victoria. Brilliant. Thank you very much. So again, they're probably not going to then need highly specialized routes to uptake the magnesium. Compare that to, say, the Amazon, where I suspect, unless there's something messing around with the water quality, that there's next to no magnesium. So it's where our fish have really adapted to it. And there you go, Victoria, about 1. So Nanochromis will be sucking every bit of magnesium and calcium out the water, whereas a Malawi, which isn't that far away... sorry, Don, can you get Bronwyn's comments? It's been held for review. It's a case then of we've got to give them what they need, and water changes are absolutely crucial. So yeah, Bronwyn's saying she calls rubbish on not having time to do water changes. She's a full-time student. Yeah, it's one of those things, you've just got to do it. And I've on occasions had to turn around and say, I'm going to have to reduce my collection of turtles and fish. I had to do it when the shed roof came in because I couldn't keep them safe. I had about 6 months towards the end of my PhD before I decided that no, my sanity was much more important, where I couldn't take care of all my animals properly. So I reduced the number of fish I had. Was it a bit of a blow? Yeah, it was. There's some fish that I wish I hadn't got rid of, and I wish I could have sort of turned around and gone back. Do I need to rehome that softie? Do I, Don? Really? But my fish are more important than my ego or my need to keep them. And that's the thing. So when people say, oh, we can't do water changes, a little part of me sits there and goes, really? Can't you? Can't you? Because I'm pretty sure I can see a TV in the background there. And I'm pretty sure that TV isn't there for decoration. So, thank you, Tom, for the actual numbers. Yes. There you go. What do you mean you're being pushed out? You're on the bloody live stream on Wednesday, unless you've got a life again. Something like that. Yeah, Don moved house and he had to cut down on the numbers. Recently, a friend over in Runcorn, not you, Daniel, yeah, another friend over in Runcorn, he had to redesign his whole fish house, and that meant he stripped everything out. So some of his very important fish he gave to other people with fish houses to look after, but he sold most of them just to make sure that while he was doing it, they had the safety and security. And for some of us, some of those fish are like lines we've been breeding for years. And right now I've not got anything like that, but at times I'd have sort of particular fish that were my absolute obsession. And sometimes it really hurts to go, I'm going to have to sell them. But if you can't do water changes, don't keep fish. There is a book out. I really, really don't want to name names. You should all know it. I'm trying to think. It's actually the woman's name, the method. Oh, go on. It's the Walstead method. Diana Walstead. And she, her method is that you don't do water changes. You plant lots of plants. I can see the logic there. I think you'd have to add a lot of things back into it. And don't get me wrong, you can do no water changes on certain tanks, but I'm taking marine here. And the reason marine is good is because you can actually take the proteins out the water. If you remove the proteins, you're removing all the hormones, and you're removing most of the bacteria. Marine keepers are also much more likely to run big UV lights. They also use UV spectrum lights over the tank, because a lot of corals will actually like UV. Turtles, again, we use a lot of UV, and the water will be filtered enough that most of the bacteria is out, but you're not getting the protein out, and they are mucky as hell. So I'm talking like 100% water changes every 2 or 3 days on some of those tanks. So in certain so the Walstead method, you overplant it, you have a lot of substrate in there, you pretty much accept the pH is going to tank, and you don't really dose much. You can dose some. I think later books she does talk about dosing. However, if you wander over to the forums she's quite active on, or used to be active on, one thing she did discuss a lot was how often her fish were dying, and how poor quality they were, and things like that. And that always rings alarm bells, because a lot of the stuff they were dying from was bacterial diseases. And that makes me think that the Walstead method, not only are you growing the fish, you are growing plenty of bacteria in there as well. She also now does say do water changes. She has changed it to now do water changes, but just not as frequently. I think she's talking about every couple of months sort of thing. I think if you're doing that, then you're going to have to be buffering up the KH quite a lot to avoid the pH drop. If you're doing that, then as long as you've got some sort of UV running, I don't know. If you run a heavy UV, you do water changes every couple of months, you massively understock, you massively overstock with plants, you have an active substrate, you dose to high heaven, maybe. I'm still not happy with it. Personally, I just think that maybe you should just think about water changes. It's easier. It's healthier for the fish. So I read her book, Daniel. I thought it was, I could see where her theory was going. And don't get me wrong, she is very, very good on the scientific community. I just think I think she's now at the point where she's going a very long and complicated way to solve a problem that isn't there. We've got very, very good dechlorinators. Most of us have got a really decent water supply. And if you don't, you have something called RO filters. I think and I think Don, you'll back me up on this one. I think for marine, there's cases where I think no water change method would be suitable. I know Wayne runs a no water change system on his marine tank. So I can see from that point of view, but crucially skimmers, because you can actually take protein out of salt water, you can't out of fresh water. And UV and things like that. However, I think in freshwater, I think she's trying to. It's a very long-winded way to solve a problem that isn't there anymore. That's my view on that one. Yeah, and also the cost of salt. Salt is very, very expensive. We don't have to worry about that in freshwater. We just take the freshwater out and put the freshwater in it. It's great. And people keep telling me I have to try salt. Sorry, my bearded dragon's giving me a funny look. I might have to get her out in a second. What was the other one? Oh, temperature. Temperature tends to be one of the parameters we forget. If you've got a high temperature, you have lowered the oxygen. And it's quite drastic how much you can lower the oxygen. I don't like... Yeah. We live quite close to Ineos. Yeah. It's... So temperature. If you have raised the temperature, you have lowered the dissolved oxygen in that water. And I am seeing, and Sue and I were discussing this, we are seeing a temperature creep. So I remember when we used to talk about 23 to 25 as being standard. I know people who've told me that it used to be 20 to 23 was standard. We're now talking about people going 27 to 30 as standard, 30 to 35 as things for discus. That's getting way too hot. It's not that hot in the wild. Also, in some areas where discus live, it's not that hot for them. The issue we have with discus is they've been so long in captivity and they've been bred for certain things that actually we're now getting a case where the ones that couldn't take the heat have actually been killed off. I still think we should be lowering the temperatures a bit. I mean, if I had a discus tank, I don't think I'd take it above 28 personally. And even that's a bit at the top end for me. I keep my wild ram tank at 28. I don't know. I'm starting to find more and more research that shows that they don't need it quite that high. But yeah, temperature I think is one that we in general keep too high. Like I keep saying, this thing's not going above 23. It'd be too hot in here for me above that. I've got tanks sitting down there in the fish house now that are 20, 19, 20. And these are tropical, what are generally considered tropical fish. So, yeah, some of the breeders are up to 34 with discus now. Yeah, Don's saying, I used to keep a lot of my discus at 25, 26 as well. I had one tank that used to go a bit higher and I didn't like the fluctuations. It had a lot of sunlight on it. So I used to keep that at 27, 28. But that was just purely because I didn't like the fact it had nighttime, daytime, huge fluctuations. So I kept discus in there and they were fine, 27, 28. But yeah, my other ones were 25, 26 and they preferred that, I think. I was having a discussion with Miranda today. We both keep rainbow shiners and we're wondering how low will they go. And she was saying that 10 is about what she's taken them down to happily. I've got the snakeheads, which I plan to go much, much lower over winter. They'll probably get down to about 6 to 10. over winter, something like that. What do I think? What's the great thing about this? It lowers your Alecki bill. I also don't like the fact that we as fish keepers use a lot of electricity, and that's not a good thing for our planet right now. So I think maybe a little bit lower temperature is good for everything. But crucially, like I say, I've seen this creep. When did a community tank at 27 become the norm? I think a community tank at the norm should be 22. Yeah, that is true. Higher temps equal faster growth, quicker sales. That is one of the things. James and I were talking about, if anyone's on Reptile Keeping UK, you will see James's little snakes that have just come out the eggs. Absolutely gorgeous, super noodles. Oh, by the way, I would just like to point out this conversation that James and I had. You guys will appreciate this, knowing me. So James has children, human children. I have never asked to see a photo of them. Not once have I gone, let's see a photo of the boys. His snakes? Yeah, every morning. Have you checked the snakes yet? Give us another photo of the snakes. Yeah, I'm just a bit weird there. Human kids? Nah. Snakes? Oh, they're so cute. They are. They got little tiny little snoots. I'm slightly pathetic over baby snakes. Anyway. So, the length of time that it's taken from the eggs being laid through to when he can hopefully move them onto new homes is what, about 6 months? Something stupid like that, maybe more. Whereas in fish, 6 weeks tops and they're out the door. It is a different, and we do seem to focus on this whole idea of getting the fry through quick and out. Yeah, it's a similar problem to goldfish being kept in the mid-20s. Goldfish are carp. They've been in captivity and been domesticated. If anyone wants to debate the term domesticated, for probably the longest of any fish we've got. So why did I say that? A lot of animal rights groups say that you either have things that are domesticated or exotic, and that exotic shouldn't be kept. And that seems to be the hard line. Where do we draw the line at domesticated versus exotic? So I'm coming from an archaeological background. Is that domesticated is from the original term domesticated actually came from archaeology, and it means when we can tell it's been in contact with humans. So for cattle, it's things like when we start to see wear marks from, or change in musculature from harnesses or things like that. It's when we start to see the species change to suit farming. Things like that. That's what in archaeology we consider domesticated. But it's basically that they have been changed in some way to make them more suitable to live alongside humans. In my world, anything that's got a different morph in it is now officially domesticated. So I'm talking about all the fish that we have different colours, all the fish that we have different fin lengths. And I think that's got to realistically be what's considered. If we've got albino anythings, you are not telling me that albino Cories, bred in their thousands, would survive in the wild. If they wouldn't survive in the wild, they are domesticated. My little thing. Yeah, some of us need gloves. Yeah, I need gloves to put my hands in my tank as well. Yeah, I need like electric proof ones. But yes, I think we need to stop this tide of temperature is going more and more and more and more and more. And I'm going to pick up on something there's Tom Page has said, short term is for seasonal changes is fine. Tom's saying he's kept rams at 25. I think it's going to be really fascinating as to what do they experience in the wild. I'm following a lot of people who are out in Brazil right now, sticking to thermometers in the river and going, "Oh, that's the temperature." It's one of those things. We need to look at what they're in the wild, because I don't care how much they're domesticated, they still have that evolutionary change in them, that evolutionary basis. Neon tetras are the great example. They are rubbish in your standard tank. Put neon tetras in your standard tank and they are drab little fish. Put them in a black water tank with enough space to mess around, dim the lights down a bit, perfect. They are different. They are little jewels in a black water tank. And that's what I think we're forgetting. I think we need to accept that they're domesticated species, but they have wild origins. If I said to you guys tomorrow, I'm going to start feeding my dogs on nothing but marshmallows, you'd rightly be up in arms. If I said I'm going to keep my dogs in a sauna, then again, you'd rightly be up in arms. We've got to start looking at our fish and saying, right, here's the parameters that they live in the wild, and I'm going to get as close to that as I can. I don't think we need to be... I don't think we... Say if a fish in the wild is at 8.2 and your water is 8.1, that's fine. And I mean that genuinely. If it's that close. Please remember, though, that 1 pH point is times 10. So going from 7 to 8 is 10 times less acidic. Going from something like 8 to 6, you've made that 100 times more acidic. So don't assume because they're within a couple of pH points that that's anywhere close. But 0.1, 0.2, we don't really need to be stressing out that much. Especially as a lot of the sites aren't that accurate. And there are seasonal changes. I'm going to start really researching that. I think I was saying a couple of live streams ago, that's one of my research points right now. Looking at the seasonal varieties in pH, KH, and temperature for the fish I keep. Because I think that'd be interesting. One thing I am going to do, and I don't know if I'm right on this one, but it's more practical. They're going to have winter at my winter, even if they come from a different hemisphere, and their winter is reversed. They are going to get our winter and our summer. And I'm going to raise the temperature to what they need to in the summer, although I don't think they'll need it. I think it'll just be a case of over winter, I'll be holding the temperature a bit higher than it would be sitting in my fish house. And I think that'll be quite interesting because I think there is going to be some seasonal changes. I think we've got to understand that it might be caused by maybe glacier melts at certain points, lowering the water temperature. It might not be, or it might be dry season is leading to shallow water, which is leading to warmer water. So I think there's a lot of things to play with, but it's going to be interesting. I think it might be one of those areas where I can find out more information, sort of thing. So yes, that was the quick trot through parameters. I am going to put this together as a video. I have done a video for the genetics thing that I didn't finish off. I'm not going to check it now because it'll probably crash everything. But my computer, last time I checked, was saying 19 hours to upload. Yeah. Yeah. Tom A is just putting, yeah, Panda Cory, they live at the bottom of mountains that get snow on them. White Cloud Mountain minnows, they live in areas that get snow on them. There's a species of Geophagus, and Geophagus are normally kept at like stupidly high temperatures. And then they're also found in places that are really cold. Just because they live at the tropics, remember it gets bloody cold in some of the areas of the tropics. You get snow on the mountains in some areas of the tropics. And you get animals living up and down there. The one thing I think I'm always going to bang on about is this microclimates idea. Reptiles is becoming more and more attuned to this, and I think we need to take that lead. Take leopard geckos. You ask anybody and they say leopard geckos live in the desert. Except when people have studied them, they've found that actually leopard geckos live in areas in hot, dry climates that are cold and moist. So leopard geckos actually appreciate a slightly higher humidity than we've ever thought, even though the overall climate is quite warm and dry. They're much more appreciative of colder and damper. And I think in fish keeping we need to follow that. It's absolutely no use looking at something that comes from the mouth of a river versus something that comes right up near the source. The River Mersey is one of the shortest rivers going. If you go down to the mouth of the river right now, you're going to get seawater for 12 hours of the day. As you go up to the source, you've got incredibly low pH and thick snow half the year. You don't get thick snow down in Liverpool. And that's one of the shortest rivers I know of in the world. Part way down, you're still getting a tidal barrage right the way up there. You've got areas that originally were very, very wide, very, very shallow. Well, crucially, any fish living in the pools there would have got incredibly warm waters in the summer and probably damn near frozen solid in the winter. They would have probably retreated into the main channel in the winter. So it's these sort of microclimates that I think are going to be really fascinating and looking down into it. No idea how I'm going to present all this data, but we will at some time do it. So yes, anybody got any questions before I head off and carry on trying to upload videos and things like that? In fact, while you think of questions, I'm just going to go grab my bearded dragon because she's looking pathetic. No Ruth rants. No, I'm not in a ranty mood today. I can't manage to put my microphone back on mood today. Yeah. It's your fault, Dandelion. You go there while I just clip this on. Yes. Everyone, well, meet Dandelion. Go on, say hello to the camera, Dandy. Not that you know what one is. Yes, everybody meet Dandelion. She's, she can see herself. She was found wandering the streets of Manchester. Got reported to the National Centre for Reptile Welfare. I went out to pick her up with the plan to take her down and absolutely fell in love with her. So she gets to stay. She's probably the only thing I own that doesn't at least want... Oh no, I've got a tortoise that doesn't go in the water. Pretty much everything else spends at least part of the day in water, although she does like swimming. She's got an 8x3 Viv, so I've got enough space in there that she could have a decent-sized water bowl. And she does go and plonk herself in there often enough and have a little bit of a mooch around in the water. So, yeah. Don saying, yeah, found it. It's, there's some odd things found wandering the streets of Manchester. I don't think Dandy's the weirdest thing to have ever been found there. She's pretty standard for it. So come on, guys. What fish do you think we should be looking at and saying these stupidly high temperatures? Can anyone think of anything that's absolutely suitable for 30s, 35s? Because I can't really think of water that's going to regularly be that high. Yeah, maybe pools during dry season, stuff like that, but not as a standard regular thing. You know, I don't think there's anything there. Yeah, everyone's saying they found wandering the streets of. It's going to be great fun when we finally do sort out some sort of TFK UK events around the country. Because what I'll predict will be happening is we'll have them all around the place. And then basically we're going to end up on pub crawls the night after. We'll have the event during the day, or it'll be like a 2-day thing. Probably just a day thing for now. And then the night after, we're going to end up on some sort of weird pub crawl. That's all right. I don't drink, so I can film you all and laugh. That'll be a good plan. Okie dokie, guys, then. I will leave it there. Nope, no Ruth rants tonight. I will get this done up as some sort of video. Trying to decide whether I should do them all. I used to do a lot of the videos as sort of cartoony, infographicsy sort of things. Trying to decide whether I should do it that way or not. But yeah, if not, I will leave it there. And I will see you guys on Wednesday. Hopefully, I will have more technology, and I might even have a Tom. Yeah, I'll go find out if Tom's managed to get himself a social life or anything like that. So, guys, if you are... Oh, podcast. I've thought about it, Jean. I really, really have. James has got quite a successful podcast, so I've got someone I can ask the question about. I think what the plan is right now... So the newsletter's growing and growing. That's why it hasn't gone out yet, to be honest. It keeps getting bigger and bigger. Until right now, I'm not quite sure whether I can call it a newsletter anymore or whether we're calling it a magazine. And my concern with it is if I keep letting it grow, it'll be too big for me to actually cope with. But I think it's going to end up being a sort of a mini magazine-y sort of thing that goes out each month. So we've got the idea, yeah, I mean, podcasts have been something I've been definitely looking at. Even if I just do something audio only on YouTube or audio focused on YouTube, please don't bite me, dragon. She never has anyone, by the way. She never actually. She just tends to sort of nuzzle in. So yeah, I do it as well. I listen to a lot of podcasts and even just YouTubers who are mostly just speaking while I'm doing a lot of work. So I can see the attraction. It's just another thing because I've got a lot going on and it's just me. I mean, the mods are brilliant for doing this sort of thing, but when it's sort of creating things and all that sort of thing, yeah, it's definitely something that's on the list. Where did you think you were going, Dragon? It's definitely something that's on the list. And yeah, I think there's enough. If you guys can convince me there's enough interesting, if there's enough interest in it, and that it's not just going to be me yelling into the void, I'll definitely think about it. Anyway, I'll leave it on that note, guys. Can you like and subscribe, please, to make sure that YouTube knows we exist? Sign up for the newsletter. Head over to Patreon if you're not already a supporter, please. We would appreciate every dollar going. And if you're planning on buying anything on Amazon, can you please go via one of our links? Gives us a few pennies. And I will see you on Wednesday.